Promoting Theosophical Community, the Henry S. Olcott Memorial Library presents How I Became a Theosophist. I'm Dan Smolla, and our guest today is Pablo Sender.
Hello.
Pablo, what's your name?
Pablo Sender.
Okay. And how long have you been with the Theosophical Society?
I've been a member of the Theosophical Society since 1996.
Okay. And how did you first become associated with the society?
I had been studying about spirituality by myself, and at some point I wanted to learn how to meditate. So talking to my mom, I mentioned that I would like to have a group or people that I could learn from. And she was going to yoga, and her yoga teacher was a TS member. So my mom had gone to the TS one day for a lecture. So she knew about the TS, but very little. In the city that I was living, that city was a small one, so there weren't many groups there. The TS was kind of the only serious option. So she took me there, and they were giving a course on meditation. So I guess that was the way I went to this course, and then I saw that they had a huge library. You know, I was used to study by myself, so just the very fact that they had a huge library with these subjects, to me was, something amazing.
When you were younger, were you also interested in spirituality that's maybe off the traditional path, or?
Yeah, I always had a kind of religious feeling. I was raised Catholic, and I used to be pretty active in the church, but I remember that I had in my own theory that reincarnation existed even when I was 14 and I was going to church. I don't remember when I heard about it. I just knew, or it made sense to me, and in my head it didn't produce any conflict with religion. So my approach to religion, I guess, although it was deeply felt, it was more open.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess about that time I started reading more about New Age literature. I would take the writings of different movements, but after a few months I felt that was shallow, that there wasn't anything else to learn there. So I moved from one to the other until I got to the TS.
And you have a background, your academic background is?
In science. Yeah, I'm a microbiologist, and I have a PhD in biological sciences.
And what first attracted you to that, to study that?
It was more of a philosophical concern. I wanted to know how life works.
Oh, okay.
So I always liked philosophy and science, but I figured that I could study philosophy on my own, but science, you need a lab, and experiments. So I decided to take the career, to go to the university to study microbiology that has to do with the DNA. I always liked very much all the molecular biology, DNA, and the things that are inside the cells. So I started with that, and for the first 3 years I was fascinated with science. But then when I came to Theosophy when I was 21, and it presented a far wider scope of knowledge, science became really boring. I started feeling how limited science was in its approach. So my 2 last years were really hard. Before I would stay even Saturday night reading about biology and all that. It was I was really interested. Yeah. After that, I had to really push myself to study.
Now, this might be impossible to put into words, but there was a limit to the New Age literature, and there was a limit to how satisfying science, the study of traditional science, could be for you. And there seems to be not such a limit with Theosophy. Can you articulate why the limits are not there for you in Theosophy?
Yeah, actually, that was my feeling with theosophy. I felt this is something that is endless, that you won't get to a limit, that you can always understand deeply. And I think there is no limit because it talks about things that are beyond the reach of your mind. So it's not merely a set of concepts that you can study, memorize, and then that's it. You know all the concepts, and that's it. It leads you to an experience that is beyond your mind, in a sense. Even if you study by heart some concepts given in difficult books like The Secret Doctrine, you keep discovering a different and deeper meaning, once and again. It's because it's really talking about something that transcends our mind. So,
do you like to reread the same books over and over, or?
Yeah, if they are the right kind of books for that.
What would be a few titles that you would reread?
Well, The Secret Doctrine, it's a book that is not so much descriptive, but that gives you hints of a reality that is beyond words. So that book you can read constantly because, as I said, you can understand something deeper. Then there are some mystic books like Light on the Path or The Voice of the Silence, which also I think have deeper meanings than the words give. And then there are some other theosophical authors that are not aiming at that. They are trying just to describe certain, laws or characteristics. So once you read them once and you understand them, probably you're not going to get much more from that particular book. So it depends on the book. And the Mahatma letters also, of course, are books that talk about concepts beyond concepts.
Would you be able to summarize what your kind of spiritual study and practice is? I mean, how do you blend study? I know you do a lot of scholarship and study, but I know also that meditation is a big part of your practice, as is service work. So could you describe a little bit? Do you consciously try to balance it, or does it just kind of happen?
No, it just happens.
Yeah.
My first years in the TS were more intellectual, so to say. I found myself with a lot of concepts that were wonderful. For a mind that enjoys the intellectual study, that was very, very interesting to me. Now, after a few years, I realized that after all, concepts are limited. The concepts are means for something else. If you stay only at the level of the means, then they don't mean anything. So naturally, I started seeing, okay, how are these concepts going to affect my life, the way I am, the way I really perceive life. So I guess, if you have that intention, then when you study, you begin to discover a lot of hints and practices that you can develop in your life to that end. So meditation is one of them. It's very important. Also, to try to develop a state of self-knowledge, self-awareness, so that you can be aware of what is going on inside you. And once we are aware, then we can learn how to let go of things that we consider not right, or how to deal with, all the psychological processes. And then service, in my case, theosophy was so important in my life that naturally you want to give that to others if it is useful for them. So I always felt that I had to share this, for those who wanted to hear. So I guess that's my main avenue of service within the theosophical life, to try to help others know theosophy and understand a little of theosophy. So service, meditation, and practice, which is usually described in theosophy as, a very balanced discipline, are really three aspects of the same. So in my case, they come together. I don't try to practice them, consciously.
Yeah. Now, I know that you're a big fan of Krishnamurti as well as quote-unquote Theosophical classics. Krishnamurti, to be really overly brief about it, kind of says, as you were saying, wipe out all concepts, right? So how do you balance this Krishnamurti energy or approach with the other, with study, with secret doctrine, etc. How do you balance those two?
Mm-hmm. There was a period in my life in the Theosophical Society where I studied, after my first intellectual approach, I turned more towards Krishnamurti's approach, and I left, the conceptual aspect aside. And to me it was a wonderful discovery, all that Krishnamurti says. But at the same time I saw that for the most part, at least in my experience, is limited, in the sense that as also the study of concepts is limited.
Sure.
Because I think it is okay if we have a very awake and intelligent mind, we don't need any concepts. But for most of us, I guess, concepts are like fingers pointing out in a direction that we may have never looked, if not because we read it in a book. So to me, concepts are important in that way, to point out where you have to direct your attention, your mind, and then see by yourself what you perceive. I think Krishnamurti was mainly against the memorizing and repeating of a concept, because after all, that I think it has a value, but it's a limited value, a very limited value. But if you take the concept not just to repeat it, but you work on it, you try to
What do you mean work on it?
Well, for example, let us take probably the most abstract concept that we can get in theosophy, that is the nature of the absolute reality, that is described in the Secret Doctrine. I can learn how Blavatsky described the absolute reality and just repeat what Blavatsky said. That is just a concept. Now, if I can try to take my mind there, for example, when it says the absolute reality is beyond any opposites, because if it is one of the opposites, it's not the other, and the absolute is everything, so it's beyond that. So if you try to really understand and picture what is it that is beyond any opposites, what is it that is beyond time and beyond space, or you really get to a state of mind that is beyond words. Now, if you just state in the statement and say the absolute is beyond opposite, and you repeat it, give lectures, but never try to really perceive what that means, then, as I said, the concept is very limited. So you have these two stages. At the beginning, you have just to memorize the concept, probably, to understand it at an intellectual level. But then you have to try to really perceive what that means. If you do that, to me, concepts are very, very useful in that way. So Krishnamurti's approach added a very deep dimension in my theosophical approach, that once I got it from Krishnamurti, I could recognize it in the theosophical literature. But before, I hadn't seen it, because the concepts are so prominent that it's easy to lose track of every time that Blavatsky or Besan or whoever says, concepts are limited, truth is beyond any words. You just let it go. But Krishnamurti puts so much emphasis on that then you become aware of it.